With the amount of energy that's been put into restoring our liberties, just from the sheer time and hours and the sincere heart that's been put into it, you'd think we'd have won by now.
We had a Utah senator that was in our legislature for like 30 years, and he made a flagrant idiot statement. Somebody brought up private property. He says the Constitution does not guarantee private property. You guys got to get over this. Article 1, Section 1 of the Utah Constitution absolutely does guarantee private property. And they forget that in every action they take. It's exciting that we have this written binding contract that they take an oath to uphold, a sacred oath. In fact, even if they don't say, "So help me God," Noah Webster said it was an oath before God that imprecates, it invites the vengeance of God if you violate it. This is serious stuff, and the American founding fathers thought about that a lot. So this is the gospel of liberty. It's essential to everything. And again, one of the things we talked about on one of the radio programs I was on this morning was we're losing our religious liberty because we no longer even preserve it. We don't even know about it. And no institutions are really preserving it either. So anyway, I've talked a lot longer than I should have. I just was here to introduce Enoch and what he was going to talk about. But let me just say something. One other thing I'm kind of struck with. Norman Rockwell. You remember Norman Rockwell? Maybe you don't remember him, but you've seen his artwork, and he would gather in these little communities, and he painted the people that were in the audience. And they were just Americans, I say. A people that was blessed by God to be in this land. And here we are, we can gather together and we can talk about these wonderful things and exchange ideas and everything. And so he had this kind of patriotic, venue that he often talked about. And I've always loved those Americans in the 1930s and 40s that he portrayed there. And when I get together with a group of people such as yourselves, that image comes to mind again. Our attires may be a little bit different, and we have different kinds of chairs and all this kind of stuff, but the spirit is the same. And I don't know an awful lot of you at this time, and I think I love you more than I know you, but I would like to get to know you better. I don't know. It's just kind of like this Frodo thing in the Lord of the Rings. How he got up. No, it was Bilbo that said it, wasn't it? When he was leaving, Anyway, I really, really am touched by people that will take some time out of their lives to consider these eternally important principles, these things of liberty. And there are far too few friends that we have today. We need more friends. We need to collaborate together. We need to share the concepts. We need to make them popular again so that we can preserve these blessings. Because regardless of your belief system, if you don't have liberty, you're going to lose your belief system. And so this is non-denominational stuff, if you will, but it's stuff that I think God supports wholeheartedly. And so that's how critically important I think it is. And then we'll have Enoch come up, and he's got the title is Ending the Political Power of Secret Combinations, the Founder's Pattern. Those of you that have been on the training sessions we've done for the last several weeks, we've been talking about conspiracies. And the founding fathers they coined a term called secret combinations. It was in common usage in the early years of the nation. And people understood what they were. It was just, we talked about it. It's kind of like, any other usages of your common belief systems, and it was just in their system.
This presentation is going to be, I'm going to touch a little bit on some of the deep, very briefly, I guess, on some of the deep, heavier things we've talked about over the years at Defending Utah. But I really want to focus on what we do about it, on the solutions. And That's where I'm trying to stay on the cutting edge of creativity, of learning, so that, we just don't get lost in the problems that we face only. And I know many of you here have been working on various solutions over the years. You've been active in parties, you've talked to your legislators, you've done so many different kinds of things. With the amount of energy that's been put into restoring our liberties, just from the sheer time and hours and the sincere heart that's been put into it, you'd think we'd have won by now. And so this is kind of part of the problem we've been trying to understand is, well, why doesn't it work, right? And so I think we have some really good ideas here to present to you tonight. Now, I know some of you have seen our solution videos, and so some of this will be things you've already seen and you're familiar with. But then there will be other new concepts that we've been expanding upon. And I'm going to cover a little bit of the history of defending Utah, just very briefly, because I'm hoping new people come all the time that don't know much about where we've been. So a little bit of basics, but we're going to try to get to solutions. We're very excited for this book that I've been working on. We call it the committee manual, and we're going to talk about what that is and why I'm so excited about that throughout this presentation. Okay, so when you talk about ending the political power of secret combinations, it sounds like a very big thing. These are very powerful people that run the world with their trillions of dollars, and they've been doing it for centuries. So this is not about stopping them. This is about showing that we've been given the tool to make what they do irrelevant. If we make what they do generally irrelevant, at least enough to maintain our freedoms at a certain point, it ends their power, at least the pieces of it that matter. I think the scriptures and the founders understood we have to maintain our freedom even when the system is corrupt and there's corrupt people around. That was part of their genius and some of the things that they've designed. Balance of powers, ambition checks ambition. What a powerful concept.
Back when I was 6 years old, I got lost, and it was terrifying. And my first impression, which I followed, was to run. And I guarantee I didn't know where I was going, but I was making good time. But I also guarantee that falling down in the river and tripping over deadfall and boulders and getting caught in the briars and the brambles, that does not make for safety. It makes it worse. And since that time, I've learned that really the first thing you do when you get lost is you sit down. You look at your back trail. You evaluate your resources. You don't panic and you don't lose your mind. And you'll find your way back. Your back trail is a lot easier to find than something through a briar and a bramble that had nobody walked through for the last 1,000 years. What we have today in America is a well-marked black trail. Our back trail is well known. We had at one point the greatest, freest, strongest, most happy, most prosperous, and most respected nation in the world. We lost that as we diverged from our trail, but it's well marked and it should be well understood. It's written in plain English. English words have a meaning. Those meanings can be known. The only meaning they can have is what they meant at the day they were written. And if we take that back trail, we'll find our way to safety, rather than following some path that's never been crossed before that really has a lot of risks.
Okay, so we have a well-marked back trail. And so everything that we're searching for is somewhere people have already been. That's a great blessing, right? We don't have to figure out anything new, but we do have to study the path. I like this quote. Just a meme I came across that I thought was great. We do our best, even if we don't have all the answers. Divine help comes while you're in motion. And that's really how I've tried to run Defending Utah since the beginning. We don't know all the answers. We're trying things. And inspiration comes as we learn and as we grow. And I think that's definitely some things that have happened, and there's more coming. Spencer W. Kimball said, I think few people receive revelations while lounging on a couch. I believe most revelations come when a man is on his tiptoes, reaching as high as he can for something which he knows he needs, and then there bursts upon him the answer to his problems. Okay, so today we're going to talk about spiritual patterns and nature's laws. These are really very similar concepts. So in defending liberty, how do we call forth God's power and become justified before him? So we're going to talk about leveraging the laws of nature and following spiritual patterns. So this first section is going to talk about some of those patterns, and then we're going to go deeper into them. Okay, the laws of nature are always there. They're always in motion. Gravity's there. If you learn that gravity's there, you can always drop a ball and it will fall. Okay, if you understand the laws of nature, you can benefit from them for better or for worse. Good and evil can do that. Okay, these are the laws of nature. So what we need to do is be leaders in our communities, and we're adjusting our sails. Okay, we don't need, this isn't something we have to force. Once we understand the principles we're working with, we just align with those principles. I'm going to go through a few scriptures here. There's a thought that is out there to just let things fall apart. Jesus will come back and save us, and just let the nations end. The end of all nations is coming. Just forget it. Pray and wait for Jesus. Okay, but is our worship truly accepted if we allow the corruption to continue? So this is from Isaiah chapter 1. The Lord gives a condemnation to the nation of Israel during a period where they're not quite where he wants them to be. Okay, he calls them a nation astray, people weighed down by sin, the offspring of wrongdoers and perverse children. He says, for what purposes are your abundant sacrifices to me? Bring no more worthless offerings. They're loathsome to me. Your monthly regular meetings, my soul detests. This is God speaking, right? He's like, I detest you're going to church, but it just bothers me. They have become a burden on me. I'm wary of putting up with them. When you spread forth your hands, I will conceal my eyes from you. Though you pray at length, I will not hear you. So what's making the Lord so upset in this time period? There's reasoning there, problems with their corrupt government. How the faithful city has become a harlot. She was filled with justice, and righteousness made its abode in her. But now, murderers. Your rulers are renegades, accomplices of robbers, organized crime. With one accord, they love bribes and run after rewards. They do not dispense justice to the fatherless, nor does the widow's case come before them. So this is very much a description of an environment of a corrupt government, injustice in their courts, bribes, all of that, right? Okay, so he talks about a correction, and this describes the functions of a righteous government. When he says, wash yourselves clean, remove your wicked deeds from before my eyes, cease to do evil, learn to do good, demand justice, stand up for the oppressed, plead the cause of the fatherless, and appeal on behalf of the widows. I think it's definitely telling when we look in our society and just the problems with how welfare destroys the family, CPS and the trafficking of children. There's more trafficking in the government than anywhere else in the world. When organized crime, these robbers get control of the judgment seats, that's where the worst crimes will be. Okay, so I think it's very important that here the Lord is showing us that it matters to him that we allow these things to go on because of how it harms his families, how it harms his children and the widows and the fatherless. That matters to him. Matters to him so much. He's saying, I'm tired of you going to church, having your monthly meetings, and you're still praying when there's something you can do right in your own backyard. Okay. I love this. There's the thy princes are rebellious and companions of thieves. Okay, our rulers are partnering here at the Clinton Global Initiative, hub of organized crime and trafficking in this world. Okay, Orrin Hatch with Zuckerberg. So I was looking for some Henry Kissinger pictures because I know there's a lot of those, but yeah, these are just a few that I grabbed. Couldn't find the exact ones I wanted. So I want to show this spiritual pattern. Power comes from the people in all cases. even when tyrants rule. Luke 22, when the chief priests and scribes sought to kill Jesus, it says, for they feared the people. They understood that whatever they did, it mattered what the people thought of them. It mattered that it didn't look like they were doing something bad. Okay, there's always the fear of the people, even when there's tyrants in charge. So we still have the power. It's never hopeless. We just have to kind of learn where our power lies and how to organize. Okay, no matter how corrupt the system is, they still need our consent to reign over us. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Committees, nullification, and accountability. These are our rights that are protected in the Constitution. And we're going to talk about how to start revoking our consent and only lending it during times of good behavior. Okay, another pattern, attempting to gain redress is required. So here's, Jesus taught this parable of the unjust judge. There was in a city a judge which feared not God, neither regarded man. And there was a widow in that city, and she came unto him saying, avenge me of mine adversary. She's petitioning for redress of whatever problem that is. He would not for a while. He said within himself, I don't fear God and I don't regard man, but because this widow troubleth me, I will avenge her. So there's a point where they realize I need to deal with this. Now, and this is just a parable, but I think it shows his power still came from the people. Okay, so this next pattern, documenting and seeking redress creates justification. I know we have people across the country, and I'm going to just use Utah scripture for the next two slides. But the principles are natural and they apply. They're just more examples of the same. Okay, D&C 98. And again, this is the law that I gave unto mine ancients. They should not go out unto battle, save I the Lord commanded them. Okay, this is the Lord's commandments to a nation before going to war in this case. But it shows the natural principles underlying. It doesn't have to apply just to war. It can apply just to a struggle that we have, right? Although this is a spiritual war that we're in. Any nation, tongue, or people should proclaim war against them. They should first lift a standard of peace unto that people. He doesn't justify triggered reactions. If that people do not accept the offering of peace, neither the second time or the third time, then bring these testimonies before the Lord. So he wants you to keep trying, making efforts. And if you still have problems, bringing testimonies before the Lord. Now you're going to bring the case before him. That means you got to understand the case. You got to know what the problem was. You have to know kind of the details. Okay, then I, the Lord, would give unto them a commandment, justify them in going out to battle. I, the Lord, would fight their battles and their children's battles and their children's children until they had avenged themselves and all their enemies to the third and fourth generations. Behold, this is an ensample, which just means an example, unto all people for justification before me. Okay, so we need to learn that it really takes effort in advance of restoring our liberty. And we need to be able to speak well about what the problems really are. If we're just reading articles and headlines and we're just upset about some video, we don't really understand the nature of the problem. Whatever's being fed to us is just rhetoric. It could be propaganda, it could be lies. It's okay to start there, but we need to be very intelligent and look into the issues. If someone says there's a problem, well, could you argue to a lawyer properly or a judge why there's a problem? If there were a righteous judge to manage the situation, could you make that argument correctly? Or would you just say, the UN is invading, you need to do something about it? But that's such a broad concept, right? We really need to understand under the hood, what's the lawful rights that are being trampled upon in order for us to speak to them. Okay, the founding fathers followed this pattern when they said in the Declaration of Independence, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind require that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. In this case, they were separating. This isn't what we seek today. We just seek a restoration of our Constitution to be honored. Okay, so after they declared the causes, they also listed a long train of abuses. This is kind of like an affidavit of the British colonists' suffering, right? They documented it. They said, you know, your governors have come in and created courts and not given us due process. It was a long train of abuses because they wanted to justify themselves before God, but also before the world. It mattered because if the world didn't agree with what they were doing, that would be a problem for them. They wanted as much support as they could have. And so then here is one of my favorites. This is talking about a case when the LDS saints were dealing with a long train of abuses and grievances. We would suggest for your consideration the propriety of all the saints to gathering up a knowledge of all the facts and sufferings and abuses put upon them. And perhaps a committee, it's a word we're going to talk about a lot, a committee can be appointed to find out these things. They lived through these sufferings, but here it's talking about creating a committee to find out these things. Okay, so they can just kind of gather their thoughts and document them. Take statements and affidavits. Why? Why do all that? That we may not only publish to all the world, like the founders did, but present them to the heads of government in all their hellish hue, as the last efforts which is enjoined on us by our Heavenly Father before we can fully and completely claim that promise. Promise to do what? That shall call him forth from his hiding place. And also that the whole nation may be left without excuse. So this is a pattern we see with the founding fathers, with scriptures of the LDS variety and general Christianity. There's a pattern here, okay, that we need to follow. And you can kind of see the same principles behind each different example. The founding fathers had miracles. I Googled the miracle of the when the wind blew back the boats to protect the colonists. That was the photo that supposedly came up. But like, they had miracles on their behalf in their struggles. There was George Washington, who couldn't get shot, right? Bulletproof George Washington, the crossing of the Delaware. Okay, we know all about, we've heard all our lives about these various miracles. We want miracles in our struggle. We can't just be complainers. We have to be intellectual about preparing how we present these things to the world, how we teach our neighbors, and so forth. Secret combinations. Scott Bradley talked a little bit about Noah Webster. He defined the word combination in the 1828 dictionary. Noah Webster wrote the dictionary, at least in part, because he didn't want tyrants of the future to change the meaning of the words in the Constitution. And even if that weren't his motivation, it's contemporary to the time that these documents were written. So what is a combination? An intimate union or association of two or more persons, okay, they have, those two people or more have a set purpose or agreement to affect some object. So two people get together, they have an agreement to meet some end goal. It could be in a good sense if their object is laudable, if it's, a good object, and ill sense when it's illegal or iniquitous. So there can be a good combination or a bad combination. And he actually says this in the dictionary. It is sometimes equivalent to league or to conspiracy. Sometimes a combination of men to overthrow government or a combination to resist oppression. There's two examples. The founding fathers were a combination to resist oppression. They organized into provisional committees, while secret combinations organized to overthrow the government. Clearly, he knew exactly what he was trying to define here. What does the dictionary say today about the word combination? It's very watered down. An act of combining or a state of being combined. Very watered down. They change our language and we don't even know what these things mean. Yeah, a number of things combined. So trivial compared to the definition that we just read. Okay, so back to this definition. Let's look at the Utah Constitution. What does it have to say about combination, which was written much closer to the time of that dictionary, still in the 1800s, in the 1890s. Article 12, Section 20, each contract, combination in the form of trust or otherwise or conspiracy and restraint of trade or commerce is prohibited. I'm going to break that down for you because there's commas there. The yellow I put in there, okay? That was my emphasis. So the commas show there's an enumerated list. So we can break it apart into a list and read each one independently, and it's grammatically correct, and then it tells us exactly what it's prohibiting. Each contract in restraint of trade is prohibited. Okay, what does that mean? Each combination in the form of trust in restraint of trade or commerce is prohibited. Each combination otherwise not formed as a trust in restraint of trade or commerce is prohibited. Each conspiracy in restraint of trade or commerce is prohibited. So there are 4 things that are prohibited under this concept of combination. And actually, so item number 1 isn't even talking about a combination, right? It's saying the government cannot create a contract that restrains trade. This is one of the most completely obliterated and ignored parts of our Constitution. If the free market is able, this is under the free market clause of the state constitution. There's more in context, but if the free market is able to fulfill a need, the state is prohibited from creating a contract with someone to fulfill that. Now, I know when I've talked to lawyers, they would see this as, and so this is more common, you have to prove that someone is doing it on purpose as a conspiracy, that they're conspiring to ill ends. But that's really only one of these 4 points. So this takes a little bit of thinking. It's something I've been talking about for a few months now, but this is something we need right now to solve a variety of our issues, which we're not getting into today. But combination is in there. What we've said about secret combinations in the past, I'm just going to kind of go through this really fast. We published the book, Utah's Secret Combinations, the History. We've got copies of it over here if anyone hasn't seen it. And we've been publishing these unpopular opinions as we've connected how these secret combinations going all the way back to 1776 are right here in Utah and how they got here. That's what the book talks about. It's that whole history. This is just like an example of some of the players and where the local power is. And through our history, we've found a variety of these secret societies. Secret SLC, the Alta Club, the Salt Lake Tribune. This is where they talked about the power center is of politics in Utah. Utah policy is where they talk to themselves, essentially. We've discovered the Council on Foreign Relations and their local chapter under the American Committee on Foreign Relations called the Salt Lake Committee on Foreign Relations. They meet at the Alta Club. We have discovered the Skull and Bones that was initially formed on the East Coast that exists at the University of Utah. And we've talked about that in our book. We have discovered the Bohemian Grove that many, if you've seen conspiracy videos online, right, where they do this mock human sacrifice in California, and they formed a chapter in 1886 in Salt Lake. We've shown how this group that calls themselves the Buckshot Caucus proudly advertise themselves as the Utah Illuminati, and we followed them for a while, okay, until they kind of stopped talking online and hashtagging themselves that way. But this same organization, we had photos from some of our members at party meetings where they pull out this weird stuff and they do these rituals in the middle of a party meeting. Okay, we've documented so many things over the years, and we want to talk about really without having to, does everyone have to know all these things? Does everyone have to understand the big picture? Do you have to know who Henry Kissinger is? Do you have to know the 6,000, however many members there are of like the various elite secret societies? Does it matter? We need to know all that? You really don't, okay? If you're interested in it, we've got lots of research, and you can get lost forever in that. But part of something we have to avoid is getting lost in that forever. But if we don't understand that they're there and that's what we're fighting against, then we don't know our enemy. Okay. So we started with this foundational film, Prophets in the Constitution, because that's what they're trying to destroy is our Constitution. And in Constitution DVD, it's online though for free. We actually don't have any more DVDs left. This was years ago, but you can watch that if you haven't seen it. So this is important to understand because the subject was ending their political power. So we need to understand what's the tipping point. Where's kind of that point we need to focus on? Okay, the Communist Manifesto It's all about abolishing eternal truths and abolishing private property. In summary, that's what it is. The Constitution protects eternal truths and protects private property. You don't need to understand everything about secret societies and the New World Order. If you master the principles of the Communist Manifesto and the Constitution, you have enough knowledge. And so that would be where you'd want to focus. You can always identify the agenda if you understand that. You can always identify the solution right in your local governments if you understand this. And I don't know if you can even fully understand everything. I'm still learning things. Scott always says new things. That blows my mind. But just the more we know, okay, and the more in tune we get. Okay, so if you want to always recognize their activities and know how to stop them, this will get you the majority of the way. There will always be things we miss, and there will always be new things to study and other creative angles to this. But this will get you the majority chunk of what matters. If we all did this, we'd have a pretty good free society, I believe. Okay, so their goal is to control the government. We don't need to stop them from having meetings. We don't need to shut down, we don't need to go after them, so to speak. They want to control the government. And so their primary enemy is the Constitution itself, and that's what needs to be understood and guarded. The more we breathe life back into it, the less power they have. And we're going to talk about how you breathe life back into it. Okay, so learn the Constitution exactly as the founders would have explained it. We have the Federalist Papers and a lot of the old writings. Scott Bradley is great for this original source material and commentary on that, okay? And execute on the committee patterns that the founders gave us. Okay, we're going to talk about that more. I'm going to keep bringing up committees in a variety of ways. The attack on the Constitution is on multiple fronts, so the counterattack to defend the Constitution must also be on multiple fronts. Also, you are the boss. The consent of the governed is required. Okay, you have to believe this. The consent happened at the signing of the constitutions. That's when we told them, here are the rules. You follow these rules, no problem. When the founders signed that document. Somebody must be the voice of those constitutions in order to continue to speak where the consent of the people lies. Okay, we have to speak about it. We have to teach about it. Okay, we're breathing life into it as we speak, okay, with our words. This is my little representation of how they kill the Constitution through our ignorance. How the Constitution is supposed to work. We have enumerated powers at the national level. Only in those powers, they are supreme over the states. All other laws, the states are supreme over the federal government. Okay, this is how our Constitution actually works. Okay, this is real. This is how it's supposed to work. Constitution tells the government what to do, or the people. The legislature obeys the Constitution in theory. If they did that 100% of the time, great. Look at these great laws we have. They protect property. They, make everything thrive. It is the proper balance of good government. And then in our founding area, the culture was obedience to those, but not blind obedience. That's the whole point. They knew when to say no and how to say no, and the culture believed that. Okay, the constitutional system does not serve the elite whatsoever. This is the thorn in their side. This is how they would like it to work. In their mind, this is how they try to act like it works. At a centralized point, at the national government, they can make any law they want, and everybody obeys. Right? This is their dream. Okay, this is an illusion. They do this all the time, and it looks like things function that way, but it's an illusion. Okay, but consider that top-down diagram. The media announces a lie or half-truth. Then the elite use both public and private entities, wherever they have influence, to act like it's real. Mandates, court ruling, global corporations, regional governments. Okay, if you haven't seen that presentation that I did, you need to see that. And at the end of the day, People obey fake laws. You see, at the end of that trail, it's the same thing. The people are being obedient to something. They will always require us for their power. So we have real versus the illusion. Nullification. The people reject illegal laws and pretend legislation. So that's how you kill this. When these fake things come down, the people have to know how to nullify. Now, nullification is an expansive topic that I've been spending a lot of time on, and we're going to cover different forms of that. It's a very simple idea. It's just saying no, but there's a lot to it to understand an effective no. But nullification restores balance, makes void the unjust law or the pretend legislation, the founding fathers called it. So let's dive into that nullification a little bit. This is a little bit of a recap, a basic. Federalism and nullification go hand in hand. Okay, this is the system that we know we have, how it's supposed to work. It's green because it's happy and healthy. We have a vertical separation of powers. Okay, we also have a horizontal separation of powers. This is our constitutional form of government. This is a Republican form of government. There's another layer, though, that this government cannot do whatever it wants. It has to be bound down by the chains of the Constitution so they can do no mischief. Okay, that layer has to be there. Otherwise, it's just a free-for-all, which is generally what we see. Very few people are pushing those chains. Okay, the constitutions are the final arbiters on the limits of any government power at any level. Constitution is the law for the government. Where does it legally say that? Because Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution says every officer will be bound by oath or affirmation to the Constitution. So that's the first oath they have, is to what's in that document. So who enforces the law of the Constitution? All those people who take an oath, but everyone. It's everyone's job to enforce the Constitution. That's why the founders said a republic if you can keep it. If you can keep it. Whenever the Constitution is violated, a nullification of all unauthorized acts done under color of that instrument is the rightful remedy. So nullification happens at every layer of government. Okay, the city can push back against the county, the state against the federal, the judicial, legislative can all push back against each other. That's the whole point. It's a check and balance. And the motivation for that, the founders said, actually was their human nature, their drive for power. When they said ambition checks ambition. Okay, the state was given authority over one area, and presumably when it's functioning in a healthy way, the governor wants all of his power. He doesn't want anyone to take it away. And if the federal government comes in or a court ruling comes in and he knows that that violates the rules they're bound by, he's like, pound sand, no way. His ambition will protect us in that case, if that's working properly. Okay, so understand this phrase, nullification keeps the Constitution alive. If you want to see it alive, somebody has to be doing this somewhere, at some layer, somewhere. If nobody's doing it, your Constitution is dying. If people are doing it, it's moving the other direction. We're breathing life back into it when we nullify, when somebody nullifies. So we can nullify, we can also help other people nullify in their authority. We can teach our sheriff, we want you to stand with the people on this particular issue. We're here to protect your power. And so we expect this because we know you've taken an oath. Okay, you can align with people in government instead of battling them, hopefully, right, as far as we can. Right, yeah, the doctrine of the lesser magistrates, correct. And when we align with as much as we can, we don't have to be opposed to them and be their enemy and say, you're a tyrant, you're a communist, can't believe you're doing this in our city, in our county. Remember that pattern? We have to say why it's wrong. We have to teach them why it's wrong. And we have to make efforts to gain redress. so that they may be left without excuse. That is an important spiritual pattern if we want God to be behind us. Okay, so here's 3 categories of nullification. Personal nullification, something you claim in day-to-day living in defiance of someone else's unjust claim. Okay, now saying no, you can't say no to anything. It has to be within the bounds of what your rights are and what the Constitution says. So it's not just randomly saying no, but many of us did this in 2020. That was personal nullification. Okay, it's a very small example, but take that and we're going to grow it to a community scale. That's the idea. Government nullification. So when a government body makes a claim in defiance of another government entity's unjust claim. And then community nullification, which is what I call the actions of a committee of the people. When the people organize and make a claim together as a group in defiance of any unjust claim the people are responding to. So if you have the right to say no to something individually, you can say, no, you can't search my house without a warrant. Whatever it is, because you know your rights. If you can do that, can you and your neighbor do it together? Of course. Can you and your whole neighborhood do it together? Absolutely. Can you formalize that relationship a little bit more? And are you within your rights? Absolutely. Okay, why is nullification rare in government today? Why isn't the governor saying no and protecting us here in Utah, even though he has all the power? We have this problem called political parties. George Washington warned us against them. Okay, we have another problem called regional government. There's a whole presentation on that, so we're not going to dive into that. These are shadow government bodies that are doing things, making rules for us, and we're following them, and we don't even realize it. So we have these regional governments kind of all over the place, behind the scenes, crossing boundaries. So these regional governments kind of ruin the boundaries between those separations of powers. So if somebody has to nullify and nobody's going to do it, what do? The Constitution will die if nobody nullifies. That's the principle. Nullification is what keeps it alive. So you have to assemble new layers. In our local communities, we can have a variety of associations. Okay, when we organize, our new layer can nullify. But also that new layer can teach, hopefully, our local governments, the cities and the counties and the sheriffs, how to nullify. Okay, I'm the first one to think there's more corruption than we can ever dream of in this country. But I also believe that there are many opportunities to do this, to have communities actually teach our representatives how to nullify. I've learned a variety of things and the best way to go about that. And so that's what we talk about in the manual that we have and in our weekly classes every Monday night. A pattern of nature, declarations. Okay, consider this timeline. This is a timeline, okay, from beginning to end. That yellow spot in the middle, let's say that's today. Okay, this represents time. In order to nullify something, it only takes a moment. It takes, a second for the governor to call whoever at the federal level and say, get out of my state. Okay, it takes a second to have that healthy, defiant attitude of an unjust law. But you have to have support. There's a timeline of things that happen before you do it and after you do it. And this is kind of the key. A lot of people understand their rights, but they're like, well, they'll just arrest me if I won't wear the mask, right? Or things like that. Okay, so if we learn what we do before we claim our rights, what we do after, we'll be following the founding fathers and what they did. Before, we're organizing, we're declaring our position, we're teaching, we're creating our own narrative. Afterwards, we continue to teach, we defend the position we took, and we tell the story of what happened in the culture. We can use declarations to claim our rights. So that's what the Declaration of Independence was. It was a declaration of the colonists declaring what their rights were, and they're saying, this is how it's going to be from now on. Anatomy of a declaration has generally 3 things. Okay, these are from my observations. So there's a justification for something you're about to say. You're listing your grievances. I have these problems. Here's a history of what I've done to try to resolve these problems. Still not resolved. So here's my claim. I have a right to fill in the blank. Therefore, because of my right, here's how it's going to be from now on. Okay, that's a declaration. With the Declaration of Independence, there was actually So this was a very large claim. Okay, I'm not going to wear a mask is a very small claiming of your rights. Colonists saying we're now separate is a very large claim. And it took some time to take effect. It was not the first Declaration of Independence that the United States gave. There were nearly 100 claims / declarations that happened building up to the Declaration of Independence. It built consensus among the people and leaders at all levels, and it sold it to the general public as it was happening. This book, American Scripture, tells this story really well. And they've got a whole list of all these different things that happened. North Carolina calls for independence separately, then Rhode Island did it. Okay, all the different colonies. The New York Mechanics Union passed a resolution to support the Declaration of Independence. So private trade associations did it. Okay, there was a movement, and then little things started happening. The British governor was arrested at some point, kicked out of, Maryland expelled the British governor. There were nearly 100 of these that this book talks about, building up to July 4th. It didn't just happen in a vacuum. One day they're like, this sucks. Let's just declare independence. It's a great idea, Samuel. I didn't think of that. And they just did it. And right, it took a lot of buildup and work. And they were smart people. They were strategic. They had a righteous combination. They were organized. The validity of any large claim or declaration, whether it's valid or not, is in the minds of the people. The people have to understand it. They have to believe it. They have to decide that they're living a new reality. Okay, everyone else is doing it. I'm missing out. Start pulling people along. Create widespread individual nullification behavior. So as a story spread, and when enough people no longer believe in something that's old, people are like, we don't do that anymore. Whatever that is. We don't do masks. When they Salt Lake County tried to start the mask thing again in stores, it did not stick. They were hoping Salt Lake County was going to still, maybe we can get Salt Lake, right? And they tried it again. And I remember one business that we actually went to and explained their rights. When it happened again, they called us and they're like, hey, we're going to put up that sign you had. We're not going along with this. And they told me when their customers came in, they were asking, aren't you doing that mask? They're like, nope, we have rights. It was so fulfilling to see that play out. History shows the Declaration of Independence was sold to the people building up to the event. Also, the Constitution itself, 1787, when that was passed, it was sold to the people after the event. Through Federalist Papers, those essays, they had to teach the people, here's what we just did. Read about it, understand it. Okay, they wanted everyone to get behind it. This was very important. So some key points. Okay, we have a video on claim, use, defend as a law of nature. This is the process for how rights are established in nature. Okay, you can see some of our videos for kind of deeper dives on that. A declaration is a claim. So in this process, you claim your rights, then you use them. Rights that are not used are lost through attrition. And if you have to, you defend your position. So a declaration is your claim written down with testimony of justification of that claim. Okay, a declaration from a community is what I call community nullification. The people have a right to alter or abolish on their own authority. Okay, legislation and elected officials optional. They didn't need the British legislature's permission under the Crown to declare independence because they had a right from God to do that. Bigger claims require more work to justify. So if we want to do big things, we have a lot more work to do. Smaller things, you can see these things play out with a lot less effort. Selling a claim to the people is a labor of changing the culture. The Declaration of Independence was all of these, all the above. Any future big changes we want must rely on this same process from nature's laws. Local committees of safety. A local committee is a government of one type. It can be a civic authority. So we're going to talk about that. If correctly organized, a local committee is a government. So here's a little quote from history. Committees of safety existed prior to 1692 and were called by various names. It's a principle of assembling and petitioning for redress and governing yourselves, right? There's different names for them, but the founding fathers called them committees of safety. The committee which was created in that year, this is just a quote from a little bit out of context, but committee which was created in that year in New York is significant in that it was created by the militia. The colonists were dissatisfied with the government of the crown headed by Governor Sir Edmund Andros, but recognizing that their militia authority must always be subordinate and obedient to the civil authority, having serious concern over the abusive authority imposed by Governor Andros, the militia of New York created their own civil authority in the form of a committee of safety. So this is powerful history to think about what they understood. Representation on the committee was based upon 2 delegates being elected by the citizenry. On and off, many communities, colonies, and provinces exercised their right of self-governance by establishing committees as the need arose. Do you really have that right? It's a paradigm shift. I'm going to talk about, there's really 4 rights I kind of see as behind a committee. We're going to talk about this one briefly. The highest lawful power to alter or abolish. The Declaration of Independence was a form of community nullification. They said in that declaration, whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends to their rights, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. The Utah Constitution gives the same right. All political power is inherent in the people. They have the right to alter or reform their government as the public welfare may require. Okay, we created the government. The Constitution was not the government organizing itself. It is the act of the people constituting their government. The Constitution itself, it was technically illegal under the Articles of Confederation. Right? We had those governing America for like 11 years. So they couldn't use the power of the existing government to form the new government. Okay, but the power to alter or abolish by the people, the Constitutional Convention itself used this power, not the state's power. The people were in fact the fountain of all power, and by resorting to them, all difficulties were gotten over. Because there was a debate. Gosh, can we even do this? You know, is this right? They could alter constitutions as they pleased. A rigid adherence in such cases to the former, the limits of power imposed by the states, would render nominal and nugatory the transcendent and precious right of the people to abolish or alter their governments, as to them shall seem most likely to affect their happiness. The plan to be framed, the Constitution, and proposed was to be submitted not back to the Articles of Confederation under that authority, but to the people themselves. Okay, so the right to form a committee to govern yourself, it's based on your right to assemble. It's based on your right to petition for redress. These are First Amendment rights. Your right to contract is in the Constitution at both levels, and your right to alter or reform. However, I will emphasize, nobody's seeking that right now. It's unnecessary. Okay, we have a constitutional framework. When we start breathing life back into it, we will see little bits and pieces come back to life. And we don't want to reinvent a constitution. So people who go down that path are missing the point. We can understand that, like the founders, there's always a right to totally reform if you're under corruption, but we don't need to. This is the nullification support pattern. We claim our rights, but we have to build up to it, and then we have to do work afterwards. I know a lot of us have had a lot of experience putting our efforts into political campaigns and into so many things that after you've been in it for a few years, you're like, I'm just tired, right? And you wonder if it's making a difference. Maybe here and there you can say something good that happened, but the big picture, we have this curve of rights and freedoms going down. So where can we put our energy and our time and our heart to where we know at least it's not a waste of time? And this is what I suggest, is you can organize these committees in the pattern the founders gave us. And we can know we're following the laws of nature, just like gravity has guaranteed end results. We just got to learn how that works. And then as you see results personally, you'll just gain more confidence in it. And I think that's the solution that we're all looking for. So using this pattern, the founding fathers completely abolished their government using this pattern. Okay, We don't need to do that. So I proposed this question in 2020, can this pattern be used to do something much smaller? Could we lawfully terminate state emergency powers? Okay, so we came out with this campaign in 2020, End the State of Emergency. So continuing the pattern, you could call that almost the first beta test, right? And so we've had a few more. I'm not going to bring them all up now, but even just recently, trying to use this pattern. I have more experience now behind trying to do it and practical ways to try to implement it. We have this problem with smart cities in all across the world, but here, if you just go to your county commission or someone, so you got to stop the smart cities, what does that even mean to them? And even if they want to help you, they're maybe on your side partially, or they would help you if it was, maybe they don't care about the smart city. Sure, I'll stop those, but we need to be able to understand constitutionally what the problems really are. Okay, so we've come out with this declaration against what we call, not calling them smart cities, but unconstitutional districts, okay, and public-private partnerships. And we have the legal reasons in the Constitution as to why they're a problem. And so again, following this pattern, we post this different places. We've already delivered this to county officials. We presented to city councils, and we just have much more coming. So this is an ongoing program for this year. Now, there's a whole number of issues that we want to try to protect using this pattern. Okay, so organizing these efforts. This is kind of applying the committees today. We have the regional government and the federal government and kind of this problem. We want to organize the people into their own committees to be the voice of the Constitution, because very few people are speaking for it, especially in an organized way. Okay, so kind of imagine being able to build these around the state at all the different levels. Okay, a combination of committees that are educated to speak for the Constitution, and also even spawning off different news groups, which they kind of have their different aspects of how the program works. Okay, one website that has come up, it was ironcountynews.org, is a project that we started and we had people run. We now have this manual on how to do this. You can download it for free, or we just hot off the press got physical copies, and they're available here today. So if you want to read about it, and this is our best effort. Remember that meme by Spencer W. Kimball? We just do our best, and in the process of doing it, we learn. And so in that manual is kind of the best I could think of to write down that I've learned so far from experience, and it'll probably expand in the future. I'll have more to write. But it's pretty, it's got a lot in there right now, way more than enough to sort of get started for quite some time to come. So I would invite some next steps. Watch these two classes that we have online. You go to committees.us / and solutions part 1 and solutions part 2. That has some of the things we talked about here, but it's a lot more. It's expanded. Okay, and we talk about, if you want to learn more kind of about the secret combinations, we have so much content on that over the years. If you want to really dive into that and learn, know who the players are, and understand more of how they work, great. We've got lots of content for that as well. Right now, I'm just speaking more on the solutions. Watch those classes, get your manual, and we invite you to join. Go to / membership on our website. If you do, we have the amazing Dr. Scott Bradley that teaches us about the Constitution every Monday night at 8 p.m. And we record those, so if you miss them, you can log into our members area and you can see them, see all the back trainings. Let me tell this one story, largely of interest to a Utah audience. Again, I recognize we have some national audience, but in the historical record of the Journal of Discourses, there's a story that has to do with a non-religious thing that happened to Joseph Smith in the course of his travels. And it shows the understanding of the culture of America, where our political power lies that we've lost. He talks about he's traveling to some place called Ottawa. So we started for Ottawa and stopped for the night. The sheriff of Lee County came to my assistance and slept by me. In the morning, certain men wished to see me, but I was not allowed to see them. So he was being escorted by the sheriff. The news of my arrival had hastily circulated about the neighborhood. And very early in the morning, the largest room in the hotel was filled with citizens who were anxious to hear me preach and requested me to address them. Sheriff Reynolds, pointing to me, said, "I wish you to understand this man is my prisoner, and I want you should disperse. You must not gather around here in this way." So the sheriff is trying to disperse this crowd. I'm escorting him. He's under my jurisdiction, trying to get rid of the crowd. It's bothering him. Upon which an aged gentleman who was lame and carried a large hickory walking stick advanced towards Reynolds, bringing his hickory upon the floor, and said, "You damned infernal puke, we'll learn you to come here and interrupt gentlemen. Sit down there," pointing to a very low chair, "and sit still and don't open your head till General Smith gets through talking. You cannot kidnap men here. If you do in Missouri, and if you attempt it here, there's a committee in this grove that will sit on your case. And sir, it is the highest tribunal in the United States. As from its decision, there is no appeal." Reynolds, no doubt aware that the person addressing him was at the head of a committee who had prevented the settlers on the public domain from being imposed upon by land speculators, he sat down in silence while I addressed the assembly for an hour and a half. What's the moral of the story? Power is in the people. And this was common in American life in the past, to understand that, their right to assemble and govern. Okay, so I'll leave you with these invitations. So the answers to how you push back, you have to know your state constitution, because that's what you're enforcing. And that's your legal power. Everyone loves to say, like, well, it's the law, I have to follow it, right? Well, the legislators will say, that's the law, that's what we have to do. Everyone throws the law around like, pass the buck kind of thing, right? Well, the law is also the Constitution. That is your power. Yep, the supreme law. Now, state constitutions sometimes have problems. The national constitution, the founders wrote. The state constitutions, there's a variety of pros and cons and different histories in every state. But what I've found is that as you read them, you definitely find problems here and there, but they will still have the principles in most places. You just got to find how they're saying them. And if there is something bad in there, you'll find that one part of the Constitution will contradict a different part. Okay, so now the law says you can and you can't, right? What I love about the Utah Constitution, there's a spirit of the law clause, I call it. It says that in order to, I'm going to paraphrase, to preserve individual rights and free government, we must continually go back to this principles, fundamental principles, right? Okay, so that is a commandment from the people to the government. Okay, so there's a lot of things in our Constitution that actually are kind of open-ended in our favor. The 9th Amendment said, we have so many rights, we can never list them all. So whatever ones we didn't list, we still have those. And people argue in court, I have this right, it's in the 9th Amendment, and they win from time to time. We need to know where those principles are, because we have to articulate them, because people will push back and say, that's not what it means. And then you have to be like, yeah, actually, it's exactly what that means. And then you have to say, you actually need to think about this. Look at, Section 27, the spirit of the law. And Article 1, Section 1 says you have the right to property. That is very broad, and you can push that argument and stand on that in a lot of ways. Right now, we're going to need that with the water rights battles.
I'll just give a quick testimonial. I've been with Defending Utah for 10 years. And I will say, prior to that, I worked in the Republican Party for a long time trying to do some good. And I was really disillusioned after many years of being a precinct chair and trying to make a difference. And I ran for city council in Salt Lake, and it was a really great experience. But in politics, a lot of times you're trying to ferret out who are the fake ones, and you spend a lot of your time on that. And it turns out that the powerful people tend to get in charge, and there's not much you can do except educate. And so when I found Defending Utah, I got to start educating and getting involved, really doing something that mattered. And nullification is a scary word for the politicians. They're scared to death of it, and because it works. And so in the 10 years I've been working with Defending Utah, every penny I donate and everything I have done has made a very, very significant difference in our state. And it's just fun to see. So I just want to tell you that.
By the way, Enoch mentioned that, and I called it from the back, Article 1, Section 27. I thought it'd still be up. Here it is. And it is a very broad statement. Frequent recurrence to fundamental principles is essential to the security of individual rights and the perpetuity of free government. So we got to keep going back and reminding them. This is something that's got to be on their mind all the time. And if it ever strays from that point, we help to get them back there again. So I sensed somebody standing next to me. Hi, kind of thing. She says, I was at your pageant Saturday night. So that's good. How did you like it? She says, something happened. Something happened. I put my fork down. I said, tell me about it. She said, I went to the pageant with my father, who was a World War II vet, and my 17-year-old son. And she said, my father, I have never seen him cry. He sat on my right. My son, he's 17, he never cries. She says, I looked on my right and there was my father and he was sobbing. And I looked on my left and there was my 17-year-old son and he was sobbing. And she says, then I realized I was sobbing. She says, something happened. What was it? And I said, did you feel something? She says, yes. Did you feel it right here? She said, yes. I said, that's the spirit of liberty that you just felt. She goes, the spirit of liberty. Now what do I do? Okay, now you've been given an opportunity to begin something. Enoch's presented an outline. It takes digestion and understanding. But I must tell you that the effort for liberty, as was said earlier, is eternal vigilance, right? And we are a people that are so far behind the curve right now. I do not know if we've got the time we need to be able to make this right. But it's our time. But there's no more oceans to cross. There's no more plains to go across. There's no more, Rocky Mountains to hide out in. It's now and it's here and it's ours. And our decision is to what to do with the time we've got. And that's what we've got to do.